In the vast expanse of the galaxy, there was a planet known as Kivara, once a thriving world of peace and prosperity. For centuries, the Kivarians had been allies to countless species, offering knowledge and aid without hesitation. But all that changed when their star, the heart of their planet, began to slowly die. As the years passed, the once blossoming civilization began to crumble. Their once pristine oceans turned to dust, and the rich forests withered away. The Kivarians watched helplessly as their home began to fade. Desperate for help, the Kivarians sent out countless messages, reaching out to all the known civilizations. They shared their story, their pain, and their fear, hoping someone, anyone, would come to their aid. But the universe turned its back on them. Species with greater power and technology than the Kivarians, who once called them allies, now saw them as a threat or a burden. No one was willing to offer help. It was in this moment of complete isolation that a human ship picked up the Kivarians' distress signal. The message was faint, almost drowned out by the noise of the galaxy. But aboard the Sovereign, a human ship on a routine mission near the fringes of space, Captain Elias Rook heard it. Captain Rook was a man of principle, known across human space for his unwavering commitment to doing what was right. When he received the message from Kivara, he immediately felt a sense of responsibility. The Kivarians had once been respected allies, and to see them in such despair filled him with determination. Despite the warnings of his crew, who doubted the practicality of saving an entire species from certain extinction, Captain Rook knew what had to be done. "We're going," he said simply, his voice firm. The crew of the Sovereign exchanged uneasy glances. They had heard the rumors, how the Kivarians had been rejected by everyone. Some of the crew members didn't believe there was any hope left for the Kivarians. Others feared that helping them could drag humanity into a galactic conflict they weren't prepared for. But Captain Rook refused to back down. He believed in humanity's ability to make a difference, no matter the odds. If no one else will help them, then we will. With the decision made, the Sovereign altered course, heading toward the dying world of Kivara. As they approached, the sight of the planet left the crew silent. What was once a beautiful blue and green world was now a shadow of its former self. The air was thick with dust, and the once blue oceans were now empty, dried up by the dying star at the planet's core. The Kivarians' message was clear: help them, or they would be lost forever. But what kind of help could a species as young as humanity offer to one of the galaxy's oldest civilizations? Captain Rook wasn't sure, but he knew that they had to try. As the Sovereign descended toward the surface of Kivara, Captain Rook could only hope that their efforts wouldn't be in vain. As the Sovereign descended toward the surface of Kivara, the crew stared out of the viewports at the barren landscape below. The once vibrant planet, full of life, was now a lifeless husk. The oceans had turned to cracked earth, and the once lush forests had been replaced by dust storms and barren wastelands. It was clear that the planet was dying. The air felt heavy with the weight of the Kivarians' desperation. Captain Elias Rook stood at the helm, his gaze fixed on the planet. His heart ached for the people he had yet to meet, but he knew that no matter how dire the situation, humanity could not ignore the call for help. He turned to his crew and gave a firm nod. "Prepare for landing. We make contact with the Kivarians." The landing was a rough one. The Sovereign was forced to navigate through dust storms and rocky terrain to reach what was left of Kivara's cities. Once the ship landed, the crew stepped out into the dry, hot air, the ground beneath their boots crunching with every step. It felt like walking on the surface of a distant, uninhabited world. The silence was deafening. Waiting for them was a small group of Kivarians, led by a woman named Shira. She was tall and graceful, with silver skin that shimmered faintly in the light. Her eyes, large and dark, spoke of centuries of wisdom and sorrow. She stood in front of the crew, her expression unreadable. Captain Rook took a step forward, his voice gentle but filled with resolve. "We received your message. We're here to help." Shira studied him for a long moment before responding. Her voice was soft, but tinged with both exhaustion and hope. "You are the first to come, the first to offer help when so many others turned their backs on us." Her words were filled with both gratitude and pain. The Kivarians had once been one of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. They had helped others without hesitation, shared their knowledge, and guided those in need. But now, with their star dying and their planet crumbling, they were alone. Shira and her people had watched as the rest of the universe ignored their plight, turning away from their once proud allies. "We have no resources left," Shira continued. "The others have left us to our fate. But we still have hope. We hope that you, humans, are different." Captain Rook nodded. "We are, and we won't turn away from you." He felt a deep sense of responsibility as he looked at Shira and the others. He knew that saving them would not be easy, but humanity had faced impossible odds before and overcome them. This would be no different. As the crew followed Shira to what was left of the Kivarian city, Captain Rook couldn't help but notice the sadness in her eyes. But there was also a flicker of hope, a hope that maybe, just maybe, the humans could help them when no one else had. The Kivarians led the crew to a central building, a place that had once been a hub of knowledge and innovation. Now, it stood as a monument to their past, with cracked walls and broken windows. Inside, a small group of elders sat, their faces weary but determined. They were the last of the Kivarian leaders, holding onto the memories of their people's once great civilization. "We will work together," Captain Rook said, feeling the weight of the task ahead. "Humanity will do whatever it takes to help you rebuild." And with that, the first step towards saving the Kivarians began. But the journey ahead was uncertain, and the challenges were greater than any of them could imagine. The air in the Kivarian city was thick with tension. The crew of the Sovereign had gathered in a dimly lit room, surrounded by the remaining Kivarian leaders. Captain Elias Rook paced back and forth, his mind racing with the enormity of their mission. Despite the overwhelming odds, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was the right thing to do. Humanity had faced challenges before, but this was something entirely different. This wasn't just about survival, it was about saving a species from extinction. Shira stood near the window, gazing out at the barren landscape. Her eyes were tired, but there was a spark of hope in them, a hope that had long since faded for the rest of her people. She turned to face Captain Rook, her voice steady but full of emotion. "You have no idea how much this means to us. No one has offered help in years. We thought we were alone." Rook stopped pacing and met her gaze. "No one should ever feel alone. Not while there's hope left. And we won't leave until we've done everything we can." The words felt like a promise, and Shira held on to them, as though they were the last thing tethering her to the future. She knew that the task ahead was nearly impossible. The Kivarians had lost everything, their planet, their resources, and their faith in others. But here, standing in front of Captain Rook and his crew, she felt something she hadn't in years: faith. As the crew continued to discuss the logistics of their mission, Captain Rook's thoughts drifted to humanity's own journey. He knew that they were a relatively young species in the grand scope of the galaxy, but they had always been resourceful, creative, and willing to do whatever it took to survive. They had fought wars, conquered impossible odds, and pushed beyond their limits to thrive. And now, he knew they had a chance to prove their worth once again. This time, not through conquest, but through compassion. "We need to find a solution," Rook said firmly, looking at his crew. "We have no choice but to try everything. The Kivarians deserve that much. Whatever knowledge or technology we can share, we will." Lieutenant Harper, the ship's engineer, spoke up. "There might be something we can work with. If we can access their old technology, we might be able to help stabilize their planet. I'll need to work with their scientists to see what's still functional." "We'll need to act fast," Rook replied. "Every day we wait, their planet dies a little more." The team set to work, with the crew splitting into smaller groups to assess the situation and find any possible solutions. Rook personally spent time with Shira, learning more about the Kivarian culture, their technology, and what they had tried in vain to do for the last decade. The more he learned, the more he realized that this mission would require not only technical knowledge, but also a deep understanding of the Kivarians' way of life. Despite the overwhelming challenges, Rook was confident. Humanity had always risen to meet impossible odds. It was their nature. And this time, the universe would witness humanity's resolve, not in the form of war, but through the simple act of doing what was right. As night fell on the dying planet, the crew of the Sovereign worked tirelessly, fueled by a sense of purpose and a shared belief that no matter how small or young their species was in the grand scale of the galaxy, humanity had the power to make a difference. Captain Rook stood on the bridge, looking out at the starry sky. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing: humanity wouldn't back down. Not now. Not ever. The Sovereign had barely touched the surface of Kivara before the crew began to feel the weight of their mission. They were tasked with saving an entire species, and the Kivarians' only hope lay deep within the heart of their dying planet. The Kivarians had once been known for their advanced technology, but much of it had been abandoned or broken over the years. Now it was up to humanity to dig through the remnants and find something that could save them. Captain Elias Rook stood in the makeshift operations room with Shira, who had become the human crew's guide and translator. The room was filled with maps, blueprints, and old Kivarian data logs. Rook scanned through the ancient documents, but nothing seemed to make sense. Much of their advanced knowledge had been lost in the chaos of their star's collapse. They were trying to piece together a puzzle with only fragments of the pieces. Shira, standing beside him, looked over the documents with a sad expression. "We once had the technology to prevent the collapse of our sun, but the device was lost centuries ago. We've tried everything, but nothing has worked. All that's left is a faint signal we detected from the core of our planet." "The core," Captain Rook echoed. "How can we access it?" Shira's eyes dimmed with grief. "It is deep beneath the surface, in a city that was buried long ago. We believed it was a myth, but now it may be our only chance." Rook studied the map in front of them, his mind racing. The city was located far from any known settlements, buried under layers of rock and dust. The journey to the city would be dangerous, but it was their only option. If they didn't act now, the Kivarians would be lost forever. "We'll go there," Rook said, his voice steady. "We'll find this city and retrieve whatever we can to save your people." The crew set out the next morning, leaving the remains of the Kivarian capital behind. The landscape was barren and harsh, stretching out for miles with no signs of life. The air was thin and dry, and the dust storms made visibility nearly impossible. But the crew pressed on, determined to reach their destination. It wasn't just a mission now, it was a race against time. As they trekked across the planet, the crew faced numerous challenges. Harsh winds whipped through the rocky terrain, and the dust storms became fiercer with every passing hour. The temperature fluctuated wildly, from freezing cold to scorching heat. But despite the overwhelming odds, the humans and Kivarians worked together, navigating through the chaos. Shira and her people, although weakened by the planet's dying state, still carried a sense of pride and resilience that inspired the humans. Lieutenant Harper, the ship's engineer, led the way, using an ancient Kivarian map to guide them through the dangerous terrain. She had already begun to make plans for how they would access the ancient city once they found it. The Kivarians had once harnessed unimaginable power from the planet's core, and it was this energy source that they now needed to survive. After days of travel, they finally arrived at the ruins of the city. The structures were mostly collapsed, but there was enough left to suggest that this had once been a place of great importance. The humans set up camp while they studied the area, trying to identify the best way to reach the core. But as they began their work, they realized the enormity of what they were about to do. The city was ancient, and accessing the core would require everything they had. They had no choice but to go forward, for the Kivarians' future was now in their hands. Captain Rook looked at the horizon, the sun setting behind him. This is it. Whatever happens next, we're in this together. The ruins of the Kivarian city lay before Captain Elias Rook and his crew, and it was clear that what they were about to attempt would push them all to their limits. The ancient city, once a hub of innovation and knowledge, was now a crumbling shell of its former self. But deep beneath the surface, in a hidden chamber, lay the key to saving the Kivarians, the technology that could reignite their dying star. The crew worked tirelessly, guided by the old maps and the fragmented data provided by the Kivarians. Lieutenant Harper, the Sovereign's chief engineer, was at the center of the operation. Her hands moved quickly over the Kivarian schematics, her mind already working on how to adapt their own technology to what the Kivarians had left behind. But it wasn't easy. The Kivarian technology was beyond anything humanity had ever seen, and most of it was either damaged or outdated. Harper paused for a moment, staring at the blueprint in front of her. It was a machine unlike anything she had encountered before, an energy converter designed to tap into the planet's core and harness its power. The problem was that no one knew how to activate it. The Kivarians had failed to reactivate the device for decades, and their attempts had always ended in failure. "This is going to take everything we've got," Lieutenant Harper said, her voice steady but tinged with doubt. "We have to find a way to make this work, or the Kivarians are done for." Captain Rook stood beside her, his expression focused. "I know, but we've never backed down from a challenge before. We can figure this out." Shira, the Kivarian leader, watched silently from the side. She had put all her faith in the humans, and she couldn't help but wonder if they could really succeed where her people had failed. The Kivarians had been the most advanced civilization in the galaxy once, but now all their knowledge seemed useless. They had relied on their technology, but it had betrayed them. Humanity, however, was different. The humans were resourceful, and they had a history of overcoming the impossible. As the days passed, Lieutenant Harper worked closely with the Kivarian engineers, combining their knowledge with human ingenuity. They built makeshift tools from whatever parts they could find, even scavenging from the remains of the Sovereign's own systems. The language barrier was difficult at first, but Harper found ways to communicate through diagrams and simple gestures. Slowly, the Kivarians began to understand the humans' methods, and together, they started to bring the ancient technology back to life. Captain Rook watched it all unfold. He had always believed in the strength of humanity, but seeing his crew and the Kivarians working side by side, pushing past their limitations, filled him with pride. The humans had faced countless obstacles, but they had always found a way to adapt and overcome. Now, they were doing it again. Late one evening, as the sky above Kivara turned dark, a breakthrough came. Harper stepped back from the machine with a look of disbelief. The device, which had remained dormant for so long, suddenly hummed to life. Lights flickered, and the faint glow of energy began to pulse from the core. It wasn't much yet, but it was enough to know that they had succeeded. Shira stepped forward, her eyes wide with awe. "You've done it," she whispered, her voice filled with gratitude. "You've given us hope." Captain Rook looked at his crew, a rare smile crossing his face. "We're not done yet, but this is a start, and I believe we can finish this." The team had made progress, but they still had a long way to go. They had awakened the dormant energy of the planet, but now they needed to find a way to fully harness it to reignite the star. They had no time to waste. Every passing day brought them closer to the Kivarians' extinction. But for the first time since they arrived, there was a real sense of hope. Humanity had proven that, when it mattered most, their ingenuity and determination were more than enough to face even the most impossible challenges. As the humans and Kivarians worked together to activate the ancient energy converter, news of their efforts spread across the galaxy like wildfire. At first, it was just a whisper, an uncertain rumor about humanity's involvement with the Kivarians. But soon, the story reached the ears of galactic leaders, traders, and diplomats. The message was clear. A dying civilization was being helped by a young species, one that had only recently taken its place among the stars. Some factions saw it as a beacon of hope, a sign that humanity might be the fresh force needed to bring peace and cooperation to the galaxy. Others saw it as a threat, unsure of the intentions behind humanity's sudden intervention. Was this truly an act of kindness, or was humanity trying to establish dominance over a weakened species? The answers were unclear, and that uncertainty created a divide among the galactic powers. On the Sovereign, Captain Elias Rook stood on the bridge, watching the Kivarian city grow smaller as they continued their work. The mission was far from over, and the pressure was mounting. But Rook was resolute. They had come this far, and failure was not an option. Shira had remained by his side through it all, her once doubtful eyes now filled with a renewed sense of hope. Despite the grim circumstances, the Kivarians had begun to believe in the humans' determination. She watched as Rook worked with his crew, each member focused on their task. The humans had shown a level of commitment that no one had expected. And now, even though their planet was dying, Shira felt something stirring deep inside her, a feeling she hadn't had in years: optimism. But not everyone felt the same. The Galactic Council, which had long ignored the plight of the Kivarians, had taken notice. They had watched as humans rallied to the aid of a species deemed unworthy by many, and some factions were starting to question their position in the galaxy. Was it possible that humanity had a greater role to play? In the council chambers, an intense debate was underway. Representatives from various alien species argued over what the human involvement with the Kivarians meant. Some questioned whether humanity could be trusted with such power. The Kivarians had once held knowledge that was coveted by many, and their star had the potential to affect the balance of power in the entire galaxy. "I understand your concerns," said Ambassador Tar, an elder of the Cylani species, his voice calm but firm. "But we cannot ignore the fact that humanity has shown us something we all have forgotten: the power of compassion. If they succeed, it will be a victory not just for the Kivarians, but for all of us." On the other side of the room, Commander Xav from the Zrath Dominion disagreed. "What we have here is a dangerous precedent. If humanity can save the Kivarians, what's next? Will they intervene in every situation? And at what cost to the rest of us?" As the debate raged on, the situation on Kivara became more urgent. The humans had activated the energy converter, but it was only a small fraction of what was needed to save the planet's star. Time was running out, and the team on the surface was growing tired. Captain Rook knew that the clock was ticking, and that there were forces both within and outside the galaxy who were watching, waiting for them to fail. But in that moment, Rook remained focused. There was no turning back. He turned to Shira, his voice steady. "We'll finish this. Humanity will not let you down." Shira nodded, her trust in him unwavering. Despite the growing doubts from the outside world, the Kivarians had found something precious in the humans: the belief that when all seemed lost, there was always a chance for a better future. As the stars above Kivara shone dimly, Captain Rook's thoughts turned toward the future. Whether the galaxy accepted humanity's intervention or not, one thing was certain: humanity had already begun to change the course of history. The air on Kivara was heavy with anticipation as Captain Elias Rook and his crew worked tirelessly. The energy converter was active, but it wasn't enough yet. The machine had sparked hope, but the Kivarians needed more. They needed the full power of the planet's core to reignite their star. Time, however, was running out. The Sovereign had been circling the planet, and from their vantage point, Rook could see the dying star flickering weakly in the sky. It was an ominous sight, a reminder of how much was at stake. If they failed, Kivara's people would perish, and the galaxy would lose an ancient, valuable ally. But failure was not an option. Not for the Kivarians, and not for humanity. Inside the underground Kivarian city, Lieutenant Harper and the Kivarian engineers worked side by side. They had spent days trying to refine the energy converter, adjusting their human technology to harness the full power of the planet's core. Harper was on the brink of exhaustion, her hands shaking as she made the final adjustments. "It's almost ready," she said, her voice tight with stress. "But we're running out of time. If we don't get this right, the core won't be able to support the device. It's a gamble." Captain Rook stood nearby, his face lined with determination. "We've come this far, Harper. We won't stop now." The crew had already completed most of the work, but the final step required a delicate balance. They had to stabilize the core's energy long enough for the converter to channel it into the dying star. One wrong move, and the entire mission would fail. If the converter couldn't stabilize the energy, the core could collapse, causing a catastrophic explosion that would wipe out Kivera entirely. Outside, Shira and the remaining Kiverians had gathered, watching from a distance. Their hope had been reignited, but it was tempered by fear. This was the moment of truth. Shira's heart pounded in her chest as she stood beside Captain Rook, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. For so long, they had watched the galaxy turn its back on them. But now, the humans had given them something they thought lost forever: a fighting chance. "Captain," Shira said quietly, "I never thought I'd see the day when we might be saved. You've done more for us than anyone else ever could." Rook glanced at her, his expression softening just for a moment. "We're doing this together. You're not alone anymore." As the hours ticked away, the crew finally finished preparing the energy converter. Harper stepped back, her face pale but determined. She looked at Rook, her eyes filled with resolve. "It's ready." They gathered around the converter as the final sequence began. The device hummed, and a beam of energy shot from the core, slowly but surely beginning to reach the dying star. The Kiverians watched, holding their breath, praying that it would work. The moment of truth had arrived. For a few long seconds, nothing happened. Then, as if the entire planet had held its breath, the star flickered. And then, brightly, brilliantly, the star flared to life. Its light began to spread across the sky, pushing back the shadows that had plagued Kivera for so long. The Kiverian homeworld, once on the brink of death, was now bathed in the warmth of its sun again. Shira gasped, her eyes wide with disbelief. It's working." The crew erupted into cheers, their hard work finally paying off. Captain Rook smiled, relief flooding through him. They had done it. They had saved the Kiverians, and with them, humanity had proven that compassion and determination could overcome the greatest odds. But even as they celebrated, Rook knew this was only the beginning. There was still much to do, and the galaxy was watching. How they were received, and what came next, remained uncertain. But for now, Kivera's star was shining again. And for Captain Rook, that was enough. The victory was sweet, but it came with its own set of challenges. As the Sovereign and the Kiverians celebrated the reignition of their star, news of their success spread like wildfire through the galaxy. But not everyone was happy. A faction of powerful galactic leaders, who had long ignored the Kiverians, now felt threatened by humanity's unexpected success. A fleet of warships appeared on the edge of Kivera's orbit, ships belonging to a powerful group known as the Zrath Dominion. They were well known across the galaxy for their strict policies and aggressive stance toward any species they considered a threat. The Dominion had watched the humans from afar, and now they saw humanity's growing influence as something to be feared. The Zrath Dominion believed that if humanity could save the Kiverians, they could do the same for any species, and that, in their eyes, was a dangerous power to have. Captain Elias Rook stood on the bridge of the Sovereign, his eyes locked on the incoming fleet. The tension was palpable. Shira, who had been standing beside him, looked out at the enemy ships with worry. "What do they want?" she asked. "They want to make sure we don't become a problem," Rook replied. His voice was steady, but there was a deep concern in his eyes. "They don't trust us, and they certainly don't want us to continue helping the Kiverians, or anyone else, for that matter." The Zrath fleet was powerful, and they had the advantage in numbers. Their ships were heavily armed and well-equipped for battle. The Sovereign, on the other hand, was a peaceful exploration vessel with limited firepower. Rook knew they couldn't win in a direct confrontation, but he wasn't about to back down. He had already led his crew through one impossible mission. He wasn't going to let this one end in failure. "Can we talk to them?" Shira asked, her voice anxious. "Maybe they'll listen. Maybe they'll see that we're not a threat." Rook hesitated, knowing that diplomacy with the Zrath Dominion wasn't likely. The Dominion's methods were harsh and unforgiving. They believed in strength and dominance, and negotiation wasn't part of their strategy. Still, Rook wasn't ready to give up without a fight. He turned to his communications officer, Lieutenant Finch. "Send out a message. Let them know we're not here to challenge them. We're here to protect the Kivarians, not to start a war." Lieutenant Finch nodded and quickly sent the message, but Rook knew that it wasn't likely to change the situation. The Zrath Dominion wasn't one to be swayed by words. Moments later, the Zrath ships responded with a cold, threatening warning. "Turn over the Kivarians. Leave the system. Failure to comply will result in immediate action." Captain Rook clenched his fists. The stakes had just been raised. The galaxy was now watching them. And this wasn't just about saving the Kivarians anymore. It was about showing that humanity wouldn't back down. They would fight for what was right, no matter the cost. As the Zrath fleet advanced, Rook made his decision. "Prepare for battle. We may not have the firepower to win, but we have something they don't. We have heart. And we're not going to let them take this victory away from us." The battle that followed was unlike any the crew of the Sovereign had experienced. They used their small size and agility to their advantage, dodging blasts and outmaneuvering the much larger enemy ships. The Zrath fleet was relentless, but the humans fought back with everything they had. Every crew member aboard the Sovereign worked together, using their wits and their knowledge of the terrain to create an opening. Just as it seemed that they were on the verge of being overwhelmed, Shira's voice crackled through the comms. "We've found something," she said, her voice full of hope. "There's a hidden channel in the Kivarian tech. It's a signal that we can use to disrupt their communications." Rook's eyes widened as he realized what this meant. If they could disrupt the Zrath fleet's communication, they could turn the tide of the battle. He gave the order, and the crew worked quickly to activate the Kivarian signal. Within moments, the Zrath fleet's communication systems were scrambled, and chaos erupted among their ranks. Without their command structure in place, the Zrath ships began to fall into disarray. The humans took advantage of the confusion, launching a final attack that forced the fleet to retreat. As the battle ended and the Zrath ships fled, Rook looked out at the Kivarian world. They had won, but the battle was far from over. Humanity had just proven that they were a force to be reckoned with, and they would stand for what was right, no matter who stood in their way. Shira stood next to him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "You've done it," she said softly. "You've saved us, and you've proven that there is hope for the galaxy." The battle had been won, but the real work was just beginning. The Kivarian star, though reignited, still needed to be stabilized. While the Zrath Dominion had been forced to retreat, their threat wasn't gone. Humanity and the Kivarians had to prove that they could not only defend the planet, but also ensure its future. Time was still their greatest enemy. Captain Elias Rook stood at the center of the Sovereign's bridge, gazing at the newly energized star. Its light was stronger now, but the instability within the core was clear. They had reignited the star, yes, but they had only completed half of the task. Without stabilization, the star could burn out again, or worse, collapse entirely. The fate of Kivara still hung in the balance. "Harper, how's the core?" Rook asked, his voice steady but laced with urgency. Lieutenant Harper, still working tirelessly at the engineering station, glanced over her shoulder, her face tense. "We've made progress, Captain, but it's not enough. The energy from the core is fluctuating too much. If we don't stabilize it within the next few hours, all this will be for nothing." Rook nodded, then turned to Shira, who had joined him on the bridge. "We need your people's help. If we can access more of your technology, we might be able to synchronize the core's energy with the converter we've built." Shira looked at Rook, a deep sense of gratitude mixed with the fear of failure in her eyes. "We've lost so much," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "Our people are tired. But if this is what it takes to save us, we will do everything we can." She turned to address the Kivarian engineers who were still working on the planet's surface. They had been pushing themselves to their limits, trying to adapt their ancient knowledge to the humans' technology. The Kivarians, despite their weakened state, still carried the knowledge of a proud civilization, and their minds were sharp. They knew that if humanity and the Kivarians could combine their strengths, they could overcome anything. As Rook watched Shira speak to her people, he couldn't help but feel a sense of hope that had been absent in the early days of the mission. The Kivarians had once been the galaxy's shining beacon of knowledge and peace, but now it was humanity's turn to shine. Hours passed as the crew of the Sovereign and the Kivarians worked together to implement the solution. The Kivarians shared their understanding of their planet's core and energy systems, while the humans applied their ingenuity to modify the converter. Harper and the Kivarian engineers labored side by side, developing a new, more powerful stabilization system that could regulate the core's energy. Then came the moment of truth. With the new system in place, the team prepared to activate the stabilization protocol. The energy converter, now fully integrated with the Kivarian technology, hummed to life. The room was filled with the sound of machines whirring and data being processed, and everyone held their breath. "Ready to initiate," Harper said, her voice tight with concentration. Rook nodded. "Do it." As the command was given, the new stabilization system kicked into action. The energy from the core began to stabilize, the fluctuating bursts of light from the star gradually smoothing into a consistent glow. The ship's sensors began to pick up the results. The Kivarian star was now firmly reignited, and its energy levels were steady. A collective sigh of relief swept through the crew. Shira stepped forward, her face lighting up with a mixture of disbelief and joy. It's working. The star, it's stable." Rook's shoulders relaxed for the first time in days. They had done it. The Kivarians' future was secured, and they had proven that even in the face of impossible odds, humanity's determination and creativity could change the course of a civilization's fate. But as Rook looked at Shira, he knew that the story of Kivara was far from over. This victory was just one step in a much larger journey. Humanity had not only saved a species, they had opened the door to a new era of cooperation and hope for the entire galaxy. "We've done it, but we're not finished yet," Rook said. "The galaxy will see that humanity is not just a species of warriors. We are protectors, creators, and builders." Shira smiled, her eyes filled with hope. "You've given us that chance, Captain. We will rebuild, and we will stand together." And with that, the Sovereign prepared to leave Kivara's orbit, knowing that they had not only reignited a star, but had also reignited hope for an entire species. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Humanity had proven that compassion and resilience could overcome any challenge. The Sovereign slowly pulled away from Kivara's orbit, leaving behind a planet now bathed in the warm light of its reignited star. Captain Elias Rook stood at the helm, his gaze fixed on the blue and green world below. It was no longer the dying husk it had once been. The star, though still fragile, was steady. The Kivarians had their future back, and it was brighter than ever before. Shira stood beside him, watching the planet with a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. "It's hard to believe," she said softly. "After all the years of hopelessness, we're finally saved." Rook nodded. "We did it together, your people and mine. And now we'll make sure Kivara thrives again." The crew of the Sovereign had accomplished the impossible. The Kivarians had regained hope, and humanity had shown the galaxy that compassion, creativity, and determination were just as powerful as any weapon. Captain Rook felt a sense of pride, knowing that they had made a difference, not through force, but through collaboration. But the journey wasn't over. As the Sovereign turned its course toward home, Rook knew there were many more challenges to come. The galaxy had seen what humans were capable of, and not all reactions had been positive. There would always be those who feared humanity's influence, who saw compassion as weakness. And with his Wrath Dominion still lurking in the background, he knew there would be other battles ahead. "Do you think the galaxy will change because of this?" Shira asked, her voice thoughtful. Rook turned to her. "I hope so. But I know one thing for sure. Humanity won't stop helping. We won't stand by while others suffer, even if it means facing our own challenges. We've shown that we're more than just survivors. We're builders." The Kivarians, though forever grateful for humanity's help, had their own work to do now. They needed to rebuild, to reconnect with the rest of the galaxy, and to restore the greatness they had once known. But thanks to the efforts of Captain Rook and his crew, they had been given a second chance. As the days passed, the crew of the Sovereign began to feel the weight of their success. The news of Kivara's recovery spread across the galaxy, and many species started to look at humanity in a new light. There were still whispers of doubt, still those who worried about what humanity's rising influence meant. But the overwhelming message was one of admiration for what humanity had done. The humans had been the ones to step forward when no one else would. "Captain," Lieutenant Harper said, interrupting his thoughts, "we've received a message from the Galactic Council. They want to meet." Rook looked at her, his expression serious. He had expected this. The Council was eager to discuss the events surrounding Kivara. "Set up a meeting," he replied. "Let's see what they have to say." As the crew prepared for the meeting, Rook thought about the future. He knew that this was just the beginning of humanity's journey. They had proven themselves in the face of great adversity, but they were only one piece of the larger puzzle. The galaxy was vast, and it was filled with countless species, each with its own struggles, its own hopes, and its own dreams. Humanity had shown it was ready to be a part of that larger picture, to help others when they needed it most. Shira smiled at Rook. "Whatever happens next, you've given my people something we thought we had lost. Hope." Rook smiled back, a sense of pride in his chest. "We all have, and we'll keep fighting for it." The Sovereign moved through space, heading toward the unknown. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Humanity had earned its place in the galaxy. And with that, the journey of compassion, courage, and unity would continue, for as long as there were those in need. The story of Kivara was just the beginning of a new era for the galaxy, one that would forever be shaped by the power of human resolve.